This is Jeff with Solidus Equipment Systems, and this is just a quick basic setup and operation video on the GYS Autopulse 220M3 MIG welder. This is a basic operation video that will get you started with programming for the different types of wire and gas. There are much deeper custom settings you can do, but for right now, this will get it going and give you a better understanding of the setup of the machine. So when you turn it on, it comes to the main screen, and right now the two major areas that you need to be focused on is the orange boxes. The one in the top center of the screen where it says 3, that is your torch number. They are labeled from top to bottom, 1, 2, and 3. So you can set up 3 different torches with 3 different types of wire and gas. So right now we're on 3. I'm going to switch this and start with torch number 1. Torch number 1 is on this welder, the blue torch. I just hit the trigger on it and it switches over to number 1. And on number 1, we are set up in standard dynamic mode, which is full synergic, steel, that's the Fe, ferrous metal, and we are 25%, and that is the CO2 content. So we are in standard mode, steel with argon 75%, CO2 25%. That is the mixed gas that's typically available here in the United States. It's a 75-25 mix. The wire that we're set up for is 0.6 millimeter, which would be 0.23 in regular SAE terms, and 2T, which means when we pull the trigger, it's going to weld. When we let up, it's going to stop. Right now, the screen is configured to set this up by metal thickness, and our arc length is at 0. The metal thickness is basically setting up your heat and your wire speed. So when I change with the left knob, it controls the metal thickness. Your right knob is going to control the item on the right side. So if I change that and I go up to, say, 1.0, it changes my wire speed, my amperage, and my voltage. So you can see those change as I go up or down, those items change. So you can use the metal thickness to get it close and then tweak it a tenth or two either direction to kind of dial in your speed and your amperage. The arc length, typically that's depends on how you're holding the torch. You can bring that arc in or out. I would start with it on 0 and see how you like it, and maybe make some adjustments in practice and see where you want that. These items here are, right now we're reading thickness and arc length. If I hit this button, it goes to inductance. Again, those are more complex settings if you want to start changing inductance. Things like hot start, crater fill, things like that, pre-gas, post-gas flow. Those are more advanced settings that we're not going to address in this basic setup video. So we're ready basically to weld here. If I want to change my wire, let's say I want to change from 0.6 023 to a 0.8 or 030 steel, I just hit the button underneath the orange box, and my setup for steel is up here. Right now it's light gray. I'm going to make that dark so it's in black. These items are your choices. And then once you highlight these over on the right side, and you control that with the right knob, those are your selections within the items on the left. So as you can see right now, I'm set up for steel with argon and 25% CO2. If I want to change that and go up to a 15 to 20% CO2 mix, I can do that. That would be a richer argon mix, or say an argon 8 to 10 CO2. So 8 to 10 CO2, 15 to 20. Again, in the US, we have 25% CO2. You can also go to 100% CO2 if that's what you like to weld with steel. But again, most of it's mixed gas 75-25. My next item down is my wire size. Within wire size for steel, I can go with a 0.6, a 0.8, or a 1.0. I'm going to leave it at 0.6. I can put it in standard dynamic, which is full synergic, or I can go between manual and standard dynamic. If I want more control, I can go up and put it in manual mode. I'm going to leave it in standard dynamic because that's where most people use this welder. The next one is 2T. We want to be able to hold it. I'm not going to change that. We'll hold that or change that to 4T if we want to have more function with the trigger. But if you just want to weld when you pull the trigger and stop welding when you let up, you want this in 2T mode. Main parameter allows me on that other screen where I had thickness and arc length, I can have current or I can have wire speed. So I can change that main parameter. If I'd rather set the welder up by current, I can go to current. And now I've got current and arc length, and my wire, my sheet thickness moves to the center. So all I did was move current over here, and I moved my thickness over here. So now, as I increase my current, my thickness also increases, as does my wire speed and my voltage. I'm going to go back. I'm going to put it back on thickness because, again, that's where most people use it. And now I've got thickness and arc length. Okay? If I want to go to torch 2, this welder I have set up for steel on torch 1, silicon bronze on torch 2, and aluminum on torch 3. Not everybody sets them up like that. Some of them we install get steel on 1 and 2 and silicon bronze on 3. So it just depends on how you want to set it up. So I'm going to hit the torch on my red number 2, and that switches me to number 2. Again, I've got my thickness and arc length variables. And then I am set up here standard dynamic to braze with CUSI 3, which is silicon bronze. And I'm set up for 0.8 wire, 0.8 millimeter wire. Some manufacturers require some areas of the car, some items to be pulse welded with silicon bronze. If I want to change it from standard dynamic to pulse, I just hit the button. I go up here to standard dynamic, highlight that, and now I can put this down in pulse mode. Hit the check mark to enter it, and now I'm in pulse mode for silicon bronze 0.8 wire. If I want to go to aluminum, I go to my aluminum torch, hit the trigger, and now I'm on number 3. Again, thickness and arc length, and I'm in pulse mode for aluminum magnesium 1.2 wire. So this would be the basic setting for like a Ford 5554 wire that is a 1.2 millimeter wire and in 2T mode. So again, if I want to change this, let's say I'm going to weld on a different car and I need to put a 1.0 4043 wire in. I'm going to hit the button. I'm going to go up here to my aluminum, to my wire setup, and I'm going to go over here to whatever, probably like an ALSI 12 or an ALSI 5 with 100% argon, and then I'm going to change my wire size to a 1.0. Leave it in pulse mode, or if I want to change it and go to standard mode, I can certainly do that. I will leave it in pulse though, because that's where you're usually going to be welding aluminum. I hit the check mark to lock it in. Now I'm in pulse mode, ALSI 5 1.0. So I just changed it from 1.2 and changed the wire type as well. If I go put my 5554 wire back in, I go back up to the wire type. I go back up to my wire type over here within that selection item, and I go down to 1.0, and I'm going to change that to 1.2, enter, and now I'm set up for ALMG3 1.2. One thing you might note is when you set up your wire, always look at the box or the sticker on the wire for the wire type to set up your ALMG3, ALMG5, ALSI, whatever it is. Make sure you have the right wire programmed into the welder, because it will weld differently. An ALMG setup as ALSI is not going to weld good. So that's a very important setting. Same thing with the wire thickness. Always make sure your thickness setup matches the wire that's in the torch. Okay, that's it on the basic setup. As far as installing wire, again, we've got 3 torches, number 1, number 2, number 3. I've got number 1 set up for steel, 2 silicon bronze, and 3 is aluminum on this machine. So let's look at number 1. You'll notice here, if you look at the rollers, they say 0.6. And what that is, that's 0.6, that's the wire size. So if I want to change that, all of the rollers are dual size. So they are a 0.6 on one side. You can see it's got 2 grooves. You flip it over, it says 0.8. So if I want to change this wire to an 030 or a 0.8 wire, I'm going to switch that over to an 8, and it'll then be running on the inside deeper track or groove. So since this is set up for 0.6, I'm going to leave it at 0.6. Make sure you always put the thumb screw back in and just hand tighten those. It doesn't have to be extremely tight. Okay, feed your wire through from the roller. Also, always make sure that when you put the spool on, that you line up the hole in the spool with the pin here. Otherwise, your roll may flop around. That's true with all welders, I think, by the way. So you want to make sure you install the wire correctly. On this one, you're going to bring it off the bottom of the roll, through into the torch, put these down, and then lock it in. There's also a tension adjustment. Probably run this around 2.5 to 3 is a typical setting. And then you're ready to weld there. Now, you'll notice on the top one, I don't know if you saw it there, but here you can see there's a brass tube inside where the torch connects, and that actually looks like this. If you're going to weld aluminum, we need to take this out, because the aluminum liner, that red Teflon liner, is going to stick through all the way to the roller. So if this capillary tube is in there, you can't put the liner through. So it just pushes from the inside out. Grab it and just pull it on out. But always save it, because you might want to put steel or silicon bronze in this one in the future. So don't throw that away. Also, a new torch on a new welder, that liner will be sticking out about 10 or 12 inches. Put it through, and then just take a razor blade or a knife and cut it off right there, so it sticks out maybe a 1/4 inch right before it touches the roller is where you want to cut it off. The rollers for aluminum, if you look at these, they say 12A on them. The A means that it's for aluminum, which means it's got U-shaped grooves in the rollers. And the 1.2 is 1.2. They just leave the decimal out. So this one is set up for 1.2 aluminum. If I take those out and flip them over, it says 10A. So on the other side of these, if I flip it over, it'll now ride in the other groove, which is set up for 1.0 aluminum wire. The two most common you're going to use in the auto body industry is a 1.0 and a 1.2. So that's why those are what are included with the welder. So just make sure aluminum, you use rollers with an A on the end, and make sure you set them right for the wire that's in it. Same with these on steel and silicon bronze. Make sure you set it up for the correct size wire. If it isn't set up right, it won't feed right. So that's very important. On the back, on the gas setup, I don't have tanks on this right now because I wanted to be able to get a good picture of this. But right now we have number 2 and number 3 joined together and going to one regulator. And we have because that would be the argon for the silicon bronze and the aluminum. They're going to share the same tank. And then we have a single going to number 1, which is steel, which would use mixed gas. We normally set these at 30 here on the flow. You might like it a little bit less or a little bit more. It just that's kind of personal preference what you want to do there. But 30 seems to work real well for everything. If you need to contact Solidus Equipment Systems, our number is 636-405-2800. Call us. There's always somebody here to help. If you need help, let us know, and we can also do video chats or whatever we need to do to help you. Thank you.